If you want Colts talk all year long, you're in the right place.
Fires it upfield, caught over the middle. Michael Pittman Jr., there he goes! He's at the 40, he's at the 30, slips out of a tackle, 20, 10, 5, touchdown! Michael Pittman Jr. takes it 75 yards to the house. Big run, angling left, 40, he's at the 30, down the near sideline, 20, 15, 10, 5, touchdown! Jonathan Taylor, a 49-yard gallop to pay dirt.
In the Indiana Union Construction Industry radio studio, let's get the podcast started.
Welcome to the official Colts podcast. I'm Jeffrey Gorman, joined by J.J. Stankovitz and Miss Lara Overton. We are up here at Grand Park. The Colts are 0-1.
Last week at Grand Park,
Last
too.
week, a couple more practices, just a few more days going to be up here. We are in between some preseason games. Guys, we dropped the preseason opener, but we did get some looks at some players that we were itching to see at Lucas Oil Stadium, and we're going to be talking about that, where the Colts can get better, where they need to get better, and where they might get better. And also Jim Bob Cooter, the offensive coordinator. JJ had a chance to catch up with him, so that's going to be a fun crack his brain open and find out what's going on with these weapons around. But, guys, I want to go back a couple of days and where we're at, what we can take away from the preseason game. Number one, there were some bright spots. The starters had some guys played a little bit, some guys played a little bit more than that. But Shane Steichen said after the game, he got what he needed out of it, and some of these veterans as well. I just want to go over some takeaways over what we're excited about after one preseason game.
So, Bill Brooks and I do the Instant Reaction podcast, which, kind of is that immediate, all right, how do we feel about the game? What sort of some of the main storylines, stuff like that. And then I went back and I watched some of the film on Monday, and there's one guy who just kept jumping off it over and over again, and it was Adetomiwa Adebawore, the second-year defensive tackle. He had this one rush on Quinn Miners, who's the starting right guard of the Broncos, where he kind of gets him with some inside leverage, and then he hits this, spin move or something. He puts him in a blender, and Miners is, at the end of the play, he's reaching at air, and there goes Tommy right into the backfield, forcing a pressure on, I think it was Jarrett Stidham or Bo Nix at that time. I don't remember who it was, but that guy consistently jumped off the tape when I went back and watched it, and he's a guy who's been really good during training camp. If you listen to the 2-Minute Drill podcast I did last week, I mentioned he's been rushing. He's been playing like a goblin out there. I'm just trying to find some fun descriptive word to describe him, and just he seems like he has really taken a step forward based off of now what we've seen in training camp, but also that preseason game.
And he is among that group that went out to train with Coach Eddie McGilvra out in California. Tommy did, along with, of course, we talked about Quiddy. We've talked a lot about Laiatu in that group, Dio among that group. So you can kind of see what he's been implementing and how that has all really benefited him in this early part of the preseason.
Yeah, nothing really different for the starters, Lara.
Yeah.
You're getting in, you're getting work, and you're getting out.
Yeah.
Maybe the most notable thing is that Julian Blackmon played strong safety for all 7 of his snaps. Nick Cross was at free safety with the first-team defense. When Julian came out, they put Ronnie Harrison Jr., apologies. They put him in there at the strong safety. Cross still played free. So Colts still working on what that best combination looks like. But to start, it was Julian Blackmon playing strong safety.
A couple other guys just on the defensive side. You talked about what were our takeaways. I think one of the things was the takeaways. Kenny Moore and Micah Abraham both coming up with takeaways. A few other guys just that I noticed, especially in the early part of the game. I thought Tyquan Lewis was really strong.
The power he played with.
I thought he told me he feels as good as he ever has. And then Segun Olubi as well. Yeah. I thought he was really strong there on the defensive side of the ball. So a lot of guys there who I thought had strong openings to the preseason. And then, offensively, I had a chance to talk with Shane at halftime and asked him about, he said going into it he wanted to see execution from the offense. I asked him about his assessment of Anthony and what he saw, and he said, wasn't our best, wasn't our worst. There are certainly some things we need to clean up. He said, a few penalties that we need to avoid, and then just really getting out of those 3rd and long situations, avoiding those types of situations. But, what you did see is, hey, first play of the game from scrimmage, it's that, Anthony Richardson to Jonathan Taylor connection. And then in the second series, one of the things that I noticed is in between those is Anthony came off the field, grabbed the tablet, looked at the play, looked at that first 3 and out, and sat down, immediately starts talking with Joe Flacco. And then Jim Bob Cooter comes over, and you could see that whatever adjustments were made, led to a few completions on that second drive. So starting to see different things that they were implementing within that. Welcome back, Evan Hull. After what he went through last year, missing the majority of the season due to injury, I thought it was such an encouraging performance from him. Talked with him in the locker room afterward, and he was really emotional.
He was, yeah.
JJ, we talked about that, and this was something that really reassured him in terms of the strength that he has in that left leg, the confidence that he is able to play with, because it's a compelling competition there at the backup running back spot. We saw Trey Sermon get a little banged up.
A little bit, yeah.
What does that mean for these joint practices with the Arizona Cardinals? And then, the guys behind him, you've got good things in the run game from both Evan Hull and Tyler Goodson.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I mean, that's a competition that is going to take, I think, probably going to take center stage on Saturday when the Cardinals come to Lucas Oil Stadium after those joint practices. We don't know yet if the Colts are going to play their starters or not in that preseason game against Arizona.
Give me the guess.
Well, last year they didn't. Yeah. So if we're basing it off of what we saw last year, you probably will not see the starters out there against Arizona, but that opens the door then for Evan Hull to get extended run, Tyler Goodson to get extended run. We'll see, if Trey Sermon's able to play, but those two guys specifically could be a real big game for both of their chances, not just to make the roster, but to carve out a spot on that.
Can I throw one thing in there, too? What do we think about the dynamic kickoff? It was good to see Anthony Gould get a nice run in the second half, right?
Yeah, the last kickoff of the game, he took it 49 yards. That was the third longest kickoff returned so far during the preseason, and he had the most kickoff returns of any player so far during the preseason. He had 5 because there was so much scoring, right?
Yeah.
So I think you got to see some stuff. You got to work some stuff out. But I had a conversation with him in the locker room after the game where he said, we didn't know how Denver was going to play it because no one's how could you, right? So you're still figuring some of these things out. You're trying to figure, okay, what's the best scheme? What's the best way to block on a certain play? Good way to block, by the way, is having Tyree Cleveland block one guy into another to create the opening for Anthony Gould on that 49-yard return. Shout out to number 12. If you saw him on film, you'd be like, that was a really nice play.
And he's made some splash plays in camp,
he's had a couple plays
too.
There. It was just weird, though. The whole thing just felt weird until the ball got kicked off. And you have these high arcing kicks, and you kind of have a more standard return, and it didn't feel totally different.
Yeah.
But the setup, when you're looking out there, you're like, this is just weird. It's going to take a little while to wrap my head around this.
Is this out of line to say there's going to be more scoring in the NFL this year because of this kickoff rule?
I don't think that's true.
I think
you're just going to see better starting field position.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And if that's the case,
I think slightly better.
If that's the case, if you see better field position, you see it 4 times a game with 4 kickoffs, let's just say, that's a cumulative of 20 yards, or I'm saying you're more starting at the 30-yard line than you would at the 25,
that's
just
true.
watching the cutback.
Yeah.
Would there be more scoring?
I think potentially. I just think that what I was expecting when the NFL started to implement the dynamic kickoff was you're going to have explosive plays just falling out of these games. Or you're going to have what we saw with Anthony Gould happening almost every game. And then you get to it and you're like, probably get to the 27, 28, 29-yard line, which is better than the 25. So I guess it could lead to a slight uptick in scoring, but I don't think it's going to be significant enough that we're going to notice it on a week-to-week basis.
56-50.
Get your mic there, buddy.
No 56. I know. Jeez. No 56-50 games is what I was trying to get to.
It's preseason for everybody.
Let's go back really quick. Just touch on this really quick. There was about half a dozen quarterbacks that played on the Colts side. So after we saw Anthony Richardson go through that, we saw a little spattering of Joe Flacco. Saw a good dose of Sam Ellinger in there, and then a couple of guys that also went out there. Just give me your once overall on the quarterback play, especially after Anthony left the game.
Yeah, I mean, Joe Flacco did exactly what we've seen Joe Flacco do during the preseason, during training camp, where he led the Colts downfield. He had a couple nice passes in there, got some points out of it, and they got out of there. Or they had a field goal attempt and got out of there. And Sam Ellinger, same stuff that we've seen from him every preseason since he's been here. I think the interception, I think he got hit a little bit as he was throwing it. It looked like he had Jelani if he had a clean throw there for what might have been a touchdown. And then Keaton Slovis has some real arm talent to him.
Yeah.
Number 17 there. He's got some real arm talent. And then Jason Bean, he's a very athletic guy who has some flexibility. He's listed as a quarterback / wide receiver. And he's also, I think on the flip card, he was listed as a quarterback / running back. So essentially just like a quarterback, but just give him he's a weapon. And if he's able to earn a spot on the practice squad, a guy who maybe could develop a little bit behind the scenes, just a little toy for Shane Steichen to play around with at some point.
And maybe a good guy to be able to use when you're talking about running scout team, for the array of quarterbacks that you're going to face down the schedule, right? Like a guy with that type of skill set could be really valuable for those situations.
Remember the last couple of years where the Colts had to dip into their cornerback room to play Lamar Jackson and scout team?
A little bit of that stuff, yeah exactly.
So a little bit of that going around.
Yeah.
No Lamar on the schedule this year, thankfully, unless it's in the playoffs. We'll get there. But I think having a guy there who can do a bunch of that stuff, that does have value for a team, whether he's playing or not.
Guys, I want to keep an eye on Laquan Treadwell. I mean, bring a veteran in like that. You say, hey, come in here, make some splash plays, teach the young kids how it's done. We'll let them watch you, and all of a sudden he gets on the board like that. Should we keep an eye on him? And I did happen to talk to Reggie Wayne after the game about him. I said, hey, you got this young man over here who's, we know the talent's there and stuff like that. He goes, you'll be seeing more of him.
Nice.
As he walked out of the locker room. Okay. So Laquan Treadwell, props to him.
It's a crowded wide receiver room, but there's no reason why you put up great production during the preseason and you earn your way onto the roster or you earn your way on the practice squad that we won't see him this year. Yeah, we'll see.
All right, this is going to be fun. JJ had a chance to catch up with the offensive coordinator of your Colts, Jim Bob Cooter, talk about the weapons that are all around Anthony Richardson. Enjoy this one.
All right, I'm joined here at Colts camp by offensive coordinator Jim Bob Cooter. And Jim Bob, I know we just got through the first preseason game. We're about maybe 2.5 weeks into camp. We got to start with Anthony Richardson. And just what have you seen behind the scenes from him in meetings, in walkthrough, in things that haven't been out there in front of the public that give you a sense of where he's going about 2-3 weeks before the season starts now?
Yeah, appreciate you guys having me. Really excited about some of the things we've sort of been through and experienced and sort of talked through and all that with Anthony. Being around the meetings and the walkthroughs, just in particular, because it's a little bit away from the vision of the fans. It's been really good to see Anthony take control of the offense. There's, for a quarterback in this league, you've got so much you're managing. You're operating the huddle. You're sometimes it's just as simple as we're calling these plays in practice we use these walkie-talkies, and Anthony's like, hey, can you do it like this instead of like that? I've got a little bit of a southern drawl. Sometimes I got to call these plays in, Shane's doing something else, and I got to really enunciate, So he's taken pride in the details. He's taken pride in sort of operating at a high level for his position. Like I said, whether that's, hey, managing the huddle when maybe we have a substitution issue, and some quarterbacks in this league don't see it. You break the huddle, and gosh, we got 12 out there. Anthony, hey, the sort of that coaching point for a quarterback is back out of the huddle, get it right, and then go back and do it. And Anthony's done several things like that. It's just little things within the grand scheme of NFL football. Obviously, you're going to go watch the highlight plays and the great throws and runs and, hopefully touchdowns and wins and all that stuff. But it really is the little things that separates quarterbacks in this league, and we've seen Anthony really make great strides there. He's really pushed himself to improve every area of his game, and that's been really exciting for us as a coaching staff.
What have you kind of seen from him just in thinking about the game? Something Shane mentioned earlier in camp is that Anthony's kind of come in and been like, okay, well, hey, if the safety does this, can we do that? Mm-hmm. Just with having his input on plays, where a year ago, I'm sure, he's obviously a smart player, but you're throwing so much at him, drinking through a fire hose, that type of stuff as a rookie. What about just the way that he thinks about the game sort of impresses you right now?
Yeah, it's we believe it's very important for our guys to have really great understanding of what we're doing on offense. So when you come in as a rookie, when you're a young player, you learn the offense. You know sort of the X's and the O's and the depth of the route, and here's my drop footwork and all that good stuff. But the more reps you get, the more you go through that process, the more you understand what we are doing and why we are doing it, and maybe what coverage this particular play really attacks, or maybe it's not quite so good against. And for a quarterback, those are huge moments. So that understanding just continually gets added as guys get reps, as guys experience things. And sometimes the beauty of off-season and training camp is you do get to get those experiences, and maybe you do have a decision where it's not perfect, but you have the ability to learn from that, and that makes you better during the regular season. That happens to every single quarterback. It's happened with Anthony, where we're able to have, hey, something happened in practice, let's go talk about it, and then, boy, the next time that comes up, he might change the play, or he might throw the ball somewhere else,
and we'll say, hey, Anthony, why did you throw that ball over there? Here's our progression. It sort of says, hey, this is 1 and this is 2. And he may say, well, you remember that rep day 3 at camp? That wasn't there versus that coverage. I just got it real quick over there to the other guy, to the third progression, those types of things. So he's really growing in his understanding, which is great for a young quarterback. He's been fun to work with. He's been fun to talk to on a daily basis in these meetings, in these walkthroughs. So we're really excited.
Something that I've always kind of thought about him, and this goes back to a conversation I had with Shane back at the owners' meetings in March, is that Anthony doesn't play very robotically. Like, you tell him, hey, this is the progression kind of you're talking about. It goes 1 to 2 here, but he's like, well, that guy was open, so I just threw him the ball. You need a little bit of that, right, as a quarterback. You can't just play so, like, by the book when, hey, if this is going to come open because the defense did this, you kind of have to be able to see that, right?
No doubt. I think it's very obviously we have to teach a lot as coaches. We're teaching quarterbacks, we're teaching progressions, we're teaching reasoning for that stuff. You do have to be very careful as a coaching staff, as a coach, not to sort of go, hey, 1 to 2 to 3, and that's it forever. That's exactly this game is not that black and white. This game is not 1 to 2 to 3. It's, well, how do I know if 1's open? I thought 1 was open. You're telling me 1 wasn't open. There's some gray within every aspect of that thing. So to me, as it kind of ties into what we were talking about earlier, as the greater understanding of what we're doing sort of grows within all the players, the more the football gets better. And maybe he skipped 2 on the way to 3, but he had a really good reason for it, and it's better than any reasoning we have on a sheet of paper in the back, because that's not quite how football works. So it's a part of the sort of process of playing really good football. For us coaches, we have to sort of do a great job keeping that in mind, that, hey, we're going out there trying to move the ball, score points, win games, and there's a lot of different ways to do that. There's a lot of different ways, sort of maybe as we do a day 1 coaching, a day 1 sort of install to guys, here's how we read a certain play. That may not be the optimal way to do it for the entire season or someone's entire career. There are different ways to think about those things.
Can you kind of put into words to me, Jim Bob, just like the vibe of this coaching staff on offense that has returned every coach from last year? Obviously, you add Alex Tanny coming in as pass game coordinator, but everyone's back compared to what the vibe now, maybe compared to a year ago, where everyone's kind of establishing standards and an identity and all that. Now you got everyone back. What's the vibe with that?
Yeah, it's been a great group, great vibe. In this league, there's a huge advantage to having that type of continuity going from year 1 to year 2 within the coaching staff, where everything is just going to run a little bit more smooth behind the scenes. Everything's going to run sort of smoother within meetings, within our walkthroughs. Just everything is able to be sort of some of that friction that always happens year 1 within just a working environment, where we're trying to make sure we're on the same page with what a practice is going to look like, or a substitution is going to look like, or any detail of the game is going to look like. That's over and done with. We're able to sort of advance our discussions, advance our sort of knowledge of what we're doing on offense and how we're trying to attack a defense. We talk a lot about the progression that a first-year NFL player makes going from year 1 to year 2, right? It's kind of the same thing for a coaching staff, right? Year 1, you're putting in a scheme. You're going through all the details of everything. Year 2, you're able to build on those details and advance those details and have a better practice, because you don't have to spend 10 minutes talking about what does a routes versus air period look like. You already know that. You're able to spend that 10 minutes on maybe solving a schematic problem or doing one of those type things. So the energy's great. The guys are great. I think we're all excited to be back here in Westfield. The fans have really brought some energy, which has been fun. So we're trying to get after Gus Bradley and this pesky Colts defense as much as we can. They make it a challenge on us. But no, the offensive staff's been great, and looking forward to another good year.
In what ways does Gus Bradley challenge you? I mean, he's obviously been a defensive coordinator forever in this league. He's seen a ton of football. In what ways has Gus challenged this offense during training camp?
Yeah, it's a continual challenge to play really good, consistent football, play in, play out, because the Colts defense, Gus, obviously leading that charge, they punish you when you make the mistake. They they are right on top of an offense that makes mistakes or tries to do a little too much and kind of make that extra sort of try to make that extra great play instead of making the nice, very good play. So Gus and those guys can be tough on you. There's some schematic problems that they put in front of us. Sometimes, we put multiple groups on the field. Obviously, you got ones, you got twos, you got threes. We go through all these walkthroughs. We go through a bunch of developmental periods, and Gus really stresses those guys in all those periods. And for some young players, they're seeing some looks they haven't always seen or maybe haven't seen in college. It's been tough. And then ultimately, our defense just flies around and plays so fast that the pace of the game and the speed of the game is really, really high, and we have to always match that on offense.
What can you tell us about Jonathan Gannon? I think you overlapped with him for a little bit in Philly. The challenge that he will now provide your offense with the defense, the Arizona Cardinals defense, that he's going to bring in for these joint practices.
Yeah, it's going to be a real challenge. Schematically, those guys are very, very creative. Coach Gannon, his D coordinator Nick Rallis, those guys are about as creative as it comes with drawing up different looks, different fronts, different coverage structures, thinking outside the box with some of that stuff. Really stressing opposing coaching staffs and opposing offenses with their scheme. Making us really, really work and trying to give their guys as big a chance as they can to have sort of that leg up when they get to the practices. We're going to be joint practicing here soon, and then ultimately, obviously, the games. They're as creative and as forward thinking, I think, as it comes. So to be able to sort of attack that challenge in the off season, in training camp. And then in a preseason game here soon will be really big for us.
I think the one-on-one periods during these joint practices always kind of generate a lot of hype. You're going to get a lot of roars from the crowd up there at Grand Park in those. But as a coach, what do you look for in those? How do you evaluate, Alec Pierce going in a one-on-one, winning a rep, or A.D. Mitchell doing that? How do you evaluate that?
They're really, really important for us. It's an opportunity, first off, just to watch our guys compete against different guys, because obviously we go through our training camp, it's one-on-ones. A lot of times maybe Alec Pierce is up against those same one or two or three guys over and over and over, which is good. Our guys are it's great competition for us. But at a certain point, they start seeing our stuff a little bit too much. They start seeing the same old routes over and over. So to get some different opponents in here, and we're competing against them. Sometimes different opponents, just let's say from a coverage standpoint, might use a different coverage technique where I'm getting pressed at the line of scrimmage, but the Colts DBs might do it different than the Cardinals DBs, and that can be really valuable because we're going to go into this season and we're going to see both. We got to be good at getting off the line versus press coverage, and one-on-ones give you those opportunities. Same thing happens, like it's invaluable sort of watching our offensive line sort of work those pass protection one-on-ones versus different pass rushers. Same reasoning, right? You think Q and Buck haven't seen all the moves and all the adjustments. They're working, obviously working a super high level when they're doing those one-on-one things, but it's great for us. I'm sure the defense would think the same thing, to see some different guys with some different moves and perspectives and thoughts on things. It's all going to help us get better for the regular season.
Last one for you here, Jim Bob. You talked about advancing the details a little while ago. How does Shane Steichen push this offensive coaching staff to go beyond, hey, we were pretty good last year, we got to stay ahead of the curve? How does he kind of push that?
Yeah, it's vital. It's vital. And Shane's on top of us, sort of making sure that we don't stay stagnant with, here's what we did last year and that was successful, let's just do that again. That's not how this league works. These D coordinators are too good. These defensive players are too good, too sharp, too detailed. You could have a great, let's say, pass route that's been really, really good for you on third down. And gosh, you were the best in the league at a certain third down and distance because mostly this pass route was so good. Well, those defenses are studying that over the season, and next year it's not going to be as good. And if you stay stagnant, you stay right there, you're going to fall a step behind. So in this league, it's a dynamic, evolving process of moving forward. Offensive football, while we play these D coordinators that are trying to do the same thing on defense, and then ultimately all that's well and good, but we got to go teach our players and they got to go play good ball. And just as soon as we try to learn it, our guys have to understand it as well. And it's just going to constantly evolve. Shane pushes us in that way, and we push our players to think in that way because ultimately for all of us, hey, it sure is easier just to go run those same plays you know really, really well. But we have to understand how important it is to push the thing forward and embrace new ideas and embrace new concepts.
Along those same lines, you were with Peyton Manning, you're with Matthew Stafford over your career. What sort of wisdom was imparted upon you by watching how those guys push their careers along, even though they're already established as being really good quarterbacks in this league?
Yeah, it's a similar perspective because, some of the best players I've been around at different positions, and Peyton and Matthew are excellent examples of this, they were just unrelenting at working on their weaknesses, working on something that they thought, hey, I can do this better. Whatever year they were in doesn't matter. Whatever part of their career they were in doesn't matter. I got to get better at this offseason or this training camp, or, hey, summer break, I'm really working on this, and let me know what you think in training camp. That's I think how you get to the level that those guys got to and are playing at, and it's true for a lot of really, really good players in this league. You have to do that from a playing perspective as well. It's every position, it's every detail and aspect of those positions. You can't just, Tom Moore used to always say, if you're good at math, you can't just do math. You better do some English too. You can't just work on what you do well. Hey, I enjoy shooting three-pointers, so all I do is shoot three-pointers. Well, you got to work on defense. You got to work on the interior game, right? So there's a bunch of different aspects of this stuff that all our guys got to sort of make sure that they're not just living in their comfort zone, working on what they're good at. You got to go work at those things maybe that you think you can improve.
Love getting a bit of words of wisdom from Tom Moore in here on this podcast.
Can't get enough Tom Moore wisdom in all our lives.
You absolutely can. Jim Bob Cooter, offensive coordinator for the Indianapolis Colts. Thanks for joining us, man.
All right, appreciate you having me.
Fantastic stuff. Jim Bob Cooter on the path, I would say, guys, agree or disagree, that he will be a head coach one day in this league.
Oh, yeah.
He should be. He should be on more people's radar for that. He's a brilliant offensive-minded guy the Colts trust, not just with scheming things up with his relationship with Shane, but in the front office, they trust his input and evaluation on offensive players during the draft quite a bit.
Exactly. He's been super valuable in that pre-draft process. You can certainly imagine that he's going to be on the radar of the coaches and the teams who are in search of head coaches, especially with how valued the offensive minds are in those head coaching positions.
Guys, I want to get into some coaching. Charlie Partridge, talk about him.
Coach P.
Liatu Latu. Obviously, we got some new faces on here, but I do want to talk about the continuity of this coaching staff and how Shane Steichen and his staff, a little more familiarity around here, the preseason especially, changing Barnes, going from Westfield back to 56th Street, et cetera, et cetera. What do you think about the coaches?
One thing that I'll tell you is I happen to be standing at the far end, the south end of the field where the defensive line is all set up, where their part of the bench is. And the reaction when Coach Partridge went over and told Liatu, hey, you're down. And Liatu was like, no. He was kind of pleading his case to want to stay in the game. Wasn't an argument. I mean, he was arguing in a very playful,
but then he told him he wouldn't take his pads off.
He refused to take his pads off. And I talked to Coach P at the end of the game, and he said, hey, man, this is just a call coming down the line. Like, I'm just relaying the message from above here, right? Like, this, he goes, I get it. But he also told me, I love to see that, right, from a rookie who is so eager and he's so passionate that he, was going to fight to get more and more time and get more reps. But I thought that was so great. It was also fun because I was watching Coach P. He keeps a large dry erase board down there at that end of the field, and he's down there and drawing things up and using that. Like, we often see, like, the tablet. I love the old school dry erase board that's how he's using.
They should get a chalkboard.
To give guys like their feedback.
Dry erase is too... Sorry, I'm cutting you off because I have a bit here. Dry erase is too modern.
Well,
but
it's color-coded. Different markers are used for different colors.
What I'm trying to say
I don't want to give away too much.
When my dad started using dry erase boards in his high school physics class at Wheaton Warrenville South High School outside of Chicago,
in
the
Hawks,
90s, it was like Tigers.
Sorry.
It was like, whoa, you're using whiteboard, not chalkboard? Bring back the chalkboard.
Yeah.
Like, I bring back the chalkboard. You got, like, Tom Landry's hat, and you're literally X's and O's on the chalkboard.
I love
That's what I want to do. That's the old school thing I want to see now.
Yeah, that's like Rick Venturi's alley right there.
Bingo,
like, that's
exactly.
Yes, totally.
I think about the intro to Inside Football with Rick Venturi. Let's bring out the chalkboard and diagram some plays. Like, bingo, let's do that.
Would you ever wear a Tom Landry hat on the way to the stadium?
Oh, yeah.
It
would absolutely inspire confidence within everyone who is working with me on game day. Greg Rakestraw would have a much better performance doing red zone. Dave Stiver, my excellent spotter. It's Tom Landry's hat. If Tom Landry's hat can't make you work harder than I'm just out of ideas.
People are going, hey, coach, as you walk by. I mean,
you guys totally missed that reference, by the way.
I did.
Yeah. There are a couple people who get that.
I'll tell you one thing, too, about the continuity. I asked Jonathan Taylor about this in the second half. Preseason's really fun because you have the opportunity to talk with players over the course of the game. You and I were able to do that down there on the field while JJ was up from above, the voice of God, narrating everything for the entire stadium. And I asked Jonathan about how much continuity there is, how beneficial that is. And he said, we have to make it an advantage for ourselves.
Yes.
And I just thought that was such a great evaluation of just his saying, like, yes, it's there and it's available to us, but we have to be the ones to capitalize on it. That's the roster. That's the coaching staff. And when I talked to Kenny Moore and Julian Blackman about having unfinished business, and because they're a big part of the core group that signed deals in the offseason to return to this team, and they said, it is still on our minds how last season ended. We know what Houston did this offseason. We've been watching Jacksonville. We've been watching Tennessee. Like, we have something to prove. We have unfinished business within this division, and that is what they are taking in to week one.
So I want to talk about the offensive coaching staff then, because last year at this time, you're establishing an identity. You're establishing what your priorities are. You're reinforcing your pillars, that Shane is doing. You're learning what guys are good at because you've never got your hands on them before training camp last year. Really, you'd OTAs, but with pads on in preseason games, all that. Now that you have this entire staff back on that side of the ball, plus Alex Tanney coming over from the Eagles, a guy who I had a chance to catch up with him, talk about Shane, had a really interesting talk with him, and just adding him to this already existing staff. I think there's so much now that you have the foundation of 2023 that now you build on. And this isn't just you're dropping Richardson and Taylor in there, a combo that we obviously didn't see much last year. It's, hey, we know what we can do with Michael Pittman Jr. now. Can he be a little more flexible to go in the slot? We know what we have in Josh Downs. Obviously, you hope he gets back soon, but we know what we have in him. We know what we have in the tight ends. And then the big thing, this offensive line was really freaking good last year.
Oh.
You're returning all those guys. You're returning Tony Sperano Jr. and Chris Watt over there. What can you do with the offensive line to add even more creativity to
with a healthy Braden Smith now?
Exactly.
Finally.
Right.
Yeah.
And there are certain things that you can do with that personnel in the offensive line to become even more creative with your play calling, your scheming, that'll help this entire team out.
One of the things that I love about watching Coach Sperano work, in particular on game days, is I just feel like, and I've probably said this before on the podcast, but he gets guys to play really hard for, like, they play their asses off for that guy, right?
Yes.
Like that is one thing about Coach Sperano. Like, you don't have to know scheme and all of the different nuances of offensive line to respect how much he does that and how well he and Chris Watt do that for that group. Like, you can just see the buy-in from the guys, and that's top down, right? That's the newcomers, that's the rookies that are in that O-line room, all the way up to your most veteran Indianapolis Colt and Ryan Kelly. Like, he gets the most out of those guys week in and week out.
Let's hit and run a little bit. I'm going to throw a position group at you. You talk about the highs, the lows, wherever we're at. Tight ends last Sunday at 1 o'clock. What do we think?
Thought it was interesting how deep into the game Jelani Woods played.
Yep.
Like, you really have to see, it seems like that they need to see some more reps out of him.
Yeah, I mean, you have to, because they didn't see him last year.
Yeah.
Right? And he had a nice play in there.
Yeah.
I think he went up for a catch.
Well, let's see. I mean, think about it. Like, Mo had a play, Granson had a play, Will Mallory had a big play in there, right?
Yeah.
So,
and all those guys, I think what we saw is, I think you kind of look at Mo Alley Cox, Kylan Granson, and Drew Ogletree probably is like your sort of top three of that group. That's not solidified yet, but right now I think that's what we saw.
There's lots to be learned in the next week, for
right.
sure.
But then you got Will Mallory out there, like you mentioned. You got Jelani Woods out there. There still is an opportunity for those guys to work their way up the pecking order to make sure that when it comes to roster cutdown day, it is not a question that guy's on the team.
Can you keep 5?
Yeah, you can. You absolutely can, because the way the roster can shake out is with the NFL's rule on the emergency quarterback being able to be on the practice squad now. I think that opens up another roster spot potentially for a fifth tight end if that guy earns it.
How much does the new dynamic kickoff come into play too with like those tight ends, with the value that they have there because of the setup zone and how you're using that? It's a little bit.
I think that's a really good point.
Yeah.
The tight ends are a really good fit for that because they're used to blocking where you're in space a little bit more than an offensive lineman, right? And you're gonna be quicker, you're gonna be more agile as a tight end. but you also are used to putting your hands on a guy and trying to block them instead of tackling them. So that's a really interesting point, and it could benefit those guys when it comes to, hey, we need to create the best cover or return team possible, that maybe we do keep tight ends in that role.
Here's where I took away from it. Just follow me here, guys. Follow me. Flash mob. The first person starts it. That's the kicker. The ball's in the air. Everybody else is like dead still, and then all of a sudden everybody goes. I mean, that's kind of what I got out of it, a little bit of a flash mob. I like it. I hope there's going to be guys that are going to be breaking these things, and like I said earlier, who knows, maybe some higher scoring.
Is that the halftime entertainment on Saturday? Jeffrey Gorman's flash mob?
That was better than the Australian breakdancer, by the way.
I know. I should have represented
Reagan.
The star of the Olympics right there. That and the Turkish guy who just walked up and popped a couple shots and won the silver medal. That guy was incredible.
That was great. In his pocket.
And Simone Biles, obviously. But, I mean,
love the Olympics. Wish they were still here, because I said that last night. I was like, daggum, we used to turn this thing on at night.
Yeah.
And
hey, good news is it's football season. The Olympics coming into football season.
Yeah, that is
college football's back in less than 2 weeks now. Got Georgia Tech and Florida State kicking off in Dublin in a couple.
You know what conversation we were having among my family? So they're coming up for the Packers game, and they were like, "Hey, by the way, Alabama plays Wisconsin on the Saturday before. Should we do the double?
Whoa.
Should we do?
Whoa. Wait, at Lambeau?
No, in Madison. So they're gonna drive up. They're gonna do the trek. So they're like, wait. Should we have a double header? Should we do Alabama, Wisconsin on Saturday, and then Colts, Packers on Sunday?
Wait a minute. Alabama's playing at Wisconsin?
Yeah.
That's a new era there.
Right? Yeah, Kalen DeBoer, baby.
I mean, you hire a coach from the Northwest, and all of a sudden here you are going way
Shout
north
out to my good friend Jamarcus Shepard, wide receivers coach for the Crimson Tide.
Good for Alabama.
Yeah.
But while we're there, some are saying overrated at number 5. I'm just the messenger here. Don't shoot me, Bama fans. I saw that yesterday. I thought that was interesting. So
it's going to be a big year for the Tigers getting into the college football playoff, by the way.
It is. All right. I want to end this on the highest of high notes. We're going to be busy, this group, in the next couple of weeks, couple of days and stuff like this. I want to start with what's going to be happening here at Grant Park with the Arizona Cardinals coming in and obviously kicking off on the weekend on a Saturday night tilt that's going to happen, and then rolling into Cincinnati. JJ, up first, what do we look forward to?
Okay, well, first of all, in Shane Steichen's press conference after the game Sunday, he was talking about what's coming up next. And, we got these big joint practices with Arizona, and then we're on to Cincinnati, and I just was
on to Cincinnati.
I clipped the Belichick thing.
Yeah, you
and
did.
just sent it around to a couple of us. We're on to Cincinnati. All right, so now that I got that out of the way, because that's been stuck in my brain for 3 days. The Colts have 2 joint practices with Arizona. Come get your tickets, Colts.com/camp. Last 2 practices.
And they're evening practices.
Evening practices both start at 6 p.m. What a great setup. The ones last year with the Bears that we had up here, those night joint practices were incredible. Just loved it. Loved the atmosphere up there. Loved the setup. You got the sun setting, kind of like the sun setting on training camp. It all ties in. But these are going to be big for the competitiveness that you're going to see.
Yeah.
I think especially, I cannot wait to watch the DBs, because Arizona's got some players. It's not just Marv, by the way. It is Michael Wilson, their wide receiver, who I believe is engaged to Sophia Smith, gold medal winning
the soccer player. Yeah.
I think they're either together
part
or
of the triple espresso, as they're known. I was actually just talking to Cam Turner about Arizona coming in, because obviously that's where Cam was before, and he's like, it's going to be good to see Kyler, really looking forward to it. Those two have a really good relationship, and what a great test that's going to be for our defense.
Yeah, I mean, and Kyler and Richardson they're different quarterbacks. In Anthony is mobile, right? We know he's mobile, but Anthony he'll move around the pocket. He will kind of slide side to side. He's not always looking to get outside the pocket.
Right.
So you don't, it will obviously test your rush discipline against Anthony, because if he sees a lane, he's going to take it. Kyler is going to test it even more. So you want to see that front, too. When you do get into 11 on 11, you want to see that front have really good rush discipline, because Kyler Murray is going to get outside the pocket. He's going to make some crazy stuff happen, because that's what he's really good at. So I'm going to look at that. And then, obviously, again, to go back to the receivers, Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, you got Marv up here. Marv Sr.?
Man, don't know. Edgerrin James has confirmed.
Edge will be here.
I just think if Edge is confirmed and going to come up here, and obviously having his son up here at camp would be great. Hopefully Colts fans get an eye on Marvin Harrison.
But, I mean, that's a test right there for any cornerback who goes against him, because Marv Jr., the fact that he was just unquestioned the number one receiver to come off the board this year when you had freaking Malik Neighbors in this draft, where any other draft, Malik Neighbors is a top 5 pick. Just like lock. He's going there, and he was the second receiver taken because of Marv Jr. This guy is a real test for a Dallas Flowers, Jalen Jones, Juju Brents, whoever is out there against him. Even though he's only a rookie, this is his first training camp. That is going to be a real competitive test for those guys.
Really interesting to see the two former Philly coordinators go head-to-head. Shane Steichen versus Jonathan Gannon. Gannon was obviously here for a number of years in the previous coaching era. JG is phenomenal. Excited to see what he does, what he brings. Really fiery guy on the sidelines. So that's going to be a group that is really, going to come out eager to compete. It's going to be two really, really quality joint practices.
It's super important for Anthony Richardson to get a look against another defense.
No question.
That's not just vanilla. You're not running your sort of base concepts like you do against Denver,
and
Denver's running their base. You're going to have Jonathan Gannon disguising stuff, being creative in
You're
the way that he
more
plays
honest in
coverages.
joint practices than you are in preseason games.
100%. So for Richardson now, it's a test. Hey, okay, you have only played in 4 games where you've got this. How do you kind of respond day 1 to day 2 against a defense that is going to be doing some funky stuff? That's what Jonathan Gannon's going to do.
Yeah.
So how do you respond? How do you see it? Or do you improve from day 1 to day 2?
I'm really interested in not just seeing the improvement from day 1 to day 2, but then also seeing how you come out of day 2 against Arizona and go into that next practice against Cincinnati as well. What those adjustments are too. For me, it's going to be the Thursday of this week, and then next Tuesday are going to be a couple critical days right there to evaluate really where you are offensively.
And another defense in Cincinnati that does a lot of funky stuff. They disguise their coverages really well. Lou Anarumo does a fantastic job there. That's going to be a real test, too.
So much more coming up over the next couple of weeks, and so many answers for you Colts fans out here. These two have the answers, at least day to day we have, and then they could change the next day, but you never know. This is the NFL.
I might not have an answer. I'll give you one.
At Lara Overton, at JJ Stankovich on Twitter X. And, of course, on Colts.com. Thanks for listening on the Colts Audio Network and watching on YouTube. Guys, it's going to be a little bit different next week with Cincinnati because we are on to Cincinnati. We're going to come at you on Wednesday with a podcast instead of Tuesday. So
we're taking the show on the road.
Look for that. We are taking it on the road.
I've been thinking about like a location spot to film it.
And Skyline Chili?
No. No.
Not bad.
If you
Great America Ballpark?
That's what I was thinking. We go out toward the river where Adam Dunn hit tanks over the river.
I got them all.
And we film it maybe in Great American Ballpark. We could film it at what is it now? Paycor Stadium.
Yeah.
We could film it on the bridge. We could film it in Kentucky if we want.
That is true.
Ryan Geist?
If Pete Rose is not in Vegas.
I'm in on that. More than Skyline Chili. Come on.
Pete Rose in Cincy?
I'm just giving you all the Cincinnati staples,
I know,
okay?
Skyline Chili's disgusting. I can't do it.
I just put a little bit extra sugar in there. That's what the secret is of Skyline. They just have a little bit extra sugar and everything.
I mean, look, I also can't eat the cheese, so I probably miss a lot of the benefit of Skyline Chili. But I just can't do it.
All right, guys. Well, we're going to find out what's going on down in Cincinnati. You can too. At Colts.com, you'll always get the latest and greatest from these two. At JJ Stankovich again. At Lara Overton. I'm Jeffrey Gorman. Thanks for watching, bringing you everything that's going on up here at Grant Park and beyond. Remember, Colts.com has you covered. Thanks for watching.